6 dump trailers were lined up along the gravel road between Rourke Hardwood Mill and Mercer Ridge Farm. On one side of that road stood 3 mountains of sawdust, gray across the surface and warm beneath their crusts. On the other side stood 24 acres of grass that should have been brown. Every pasture beyond the Mercer fence had burned down to the color of old rope during the driest Kentucky summer in 15 years. Cattle had eaten fields nearly to the dirt. Hay trucks were arriving from 2 states away. Men who normally argued over cattle prices were now arguing over which herds they could afford to keep through winter. But Noah Mercer's restored fields were still carrying enough green to stop passing trucks. At the farm gate, Natalie Price, from Blue Ridge Reclamation, held 2 mason jars. The first contained pale hardwood sawdust from Rourke Mill. The second held dark soil taken from Noah's restored field. Clay Rourke stood beside her with his arms folded. "That material came from my mill," he said. "You're paying him for something we gave away." Natalie looked past Clay toward 6 numbered compost windrows. Then she turned to Noah. "Before we sign the load tickets," she said, "show me the pile you refused to sell." Clay laughed. "He's got 6 trucks waiting, and she wants to see his bad product." Noah did not answer. He led Natalie past the screened compost, past the finished rows, and toward 3 windrows marked by red boards. Not ready. The buyer had driven nearly 3 hours to inspect the material Noah desperately needed to sell. The Mercer family owed the bank $26. 800 inches, 17 days. If they missed the payment, they would have to sell the 31-acre lower tract that had been part of the farm since Noah's grandfather came home from Korea. Clay Rourke had already offered to buy it, and Noah was beginning the most important inspection of his life by showing the buyer what had failed. But the rejected windrows were not the greatest danger to the sale. For 7 years, Clay had allowed his sawmill to push waste across the property line. When Noah tried to stop it, Clay buried survey stakes, widened the dumping area, redirected stormwater toward the compost yard, destroyed nearly $15,000 worth of work, filed a county complaint, pressured the bank, used the mill's 34 jobs to turn neighbors against the farm, copied Noah's product idea, and told the buyer that Mercer Ridge was only a test site for material created by Rourke Hardwood. Then, 2 nights before final sampling, fresh sawdust appeared beside a finished windrow. 160 cubic yards had to be removed from Noah's offer, at $24 per yard. Honesty had cost him another $3. 840 pouces gross revenue. Clay believed the Mercer farm was too weak to stop him. He believed a young mechanic with a notebook could not turn sawdust into soil, and he believed that if Noah ever created something valuable, the mill could claim it first. What Clay did not understand was that Noah had never been selling sawdust. He had been building proof. Noah Mercer returned to Rowan County in October of 2021, 9 days after his father's funeral. He was 29 years old. For 6 years, he had worked as a field mechanic for a construction equipment company outside Lexington. He understood hydraulic pressure, contaminated oil, worn bearings, diesel engines, and the small noises machines made before expensive failures. He knew that most breakdowns were not caused by the final broken part. They began earlier. A seal started leaking. A filter was ignored. A warning light was reset. Someone decided a problem could wait. By the time the machine stopped, the failure had already been growing for months. Noah did not yet understand that the same thing had happened to his family's farm. Mercer Ridge covered 132 acres in Rowan County, Kentucky. Only 44 acres could be used reliably for crops or forage. 26 of those acres were badly depleted. The soil crusted after rain. Water moved across the surface instead of soaking in. During dry weather, the fields hardened and cracked. Grass stopped growing before July. The remaining land consisted of steep woods, creek bottom, the farmhouse, barns, and narrow fields shaped by fences built before Noah was born. His mother, June, had kept the books, while Thomas Mercer's health declined. By the time Noah came home, the farm carried $124. 0 inches debt. There were 49 cows and replacement heifers, several pieces of aging equipment, and a hay supply that had not been large enough for the previous winter. Noah did not return with money. He returned with tools, a pickup payment, and the belief that a man could repair nearly anything if he found the real cause. 3 days after the funeral, he walked the northern boundary. That was where he found the first buried fence post. Only 6 inches of weathered wood remained above the sawdust. He dug around it with a shovel. The post continued downward through almost 4 feet of compacted shavings, bark and gray wood fiber. 20 yards farther, another post had disappeared completely. Beyond it stood Rourke Hardwood Mill. The mill employed 34 people. Its planters, debarkers and saws ran 6 days a week. Log trucks entered before sunrise. Trucks carrying flooring blanks, pallet stock and rough lumber left throughout the afternoon. The mill mattered to the county. 4 generations of the Rourke family had cut timber there. Clay's father had helped finance Little League uniforms. Clay himself served on the county development board. Several Mercer relatives had worked at the mill at different times. Thomas had bought lumber there. Clay had bought calves from Thomas. Their families had shared church pews, funerals, fundraisers, and decades of rural obligations that were never written down. Behind the mill buildings, loaders pushed sawdust and bark toward the Mercer farm. Noah climbed the largest pile. From the top, he could see that the material did not fill one small hollow. It covered several acres. Fresh yellow sawdust lay closest to the mill. Older material had turned gray. The deepest layers were dark and wet. A drainage swale that had once carried water toward the creek had narrowed into a muddy channel. Young trees leaned beneath the weight. Sections of the old fence were gone. Noah took photographs. Then he returned to the farmhouse and asked his mother what Thomas had agreed to. June opened a metal filing cabinet in the farm office. She found a single-page document dated March 18. Lianqianling Ishisi. Thomas Mercer had allowed Rourke Hardwood Mill to place clean, untreated sawdust in a low area, measuring approximately 3/4 of an acre. The agreement lasted 2 years. The stated purpose was to fill a hollow and improve winter access. The mill was not permitted to cross the existing fence. It was not permitted to block natural drainage. The paper expired in March of 2016. Noah read it twice. Did Dad renew this? Not that I ever saw. Did he tell Clay to stop? June looked out the window. Your father complained about plenty of things at this table, but not to Clay. No. Thomas's health had failed gradually. At first, he stopped attending cattle auctions. Then he hired help for hay season. Then he stopped walking the northern fence. The sawdust moved a few feet at a time. A loader bucket in winter. Another row in spring. A larger push after production increased. Nothing looked like an invasion on any single day. But 7 years of small movements had turned 3/4 of an acre into approximately 5. 6 acres. Noah compared old aerial photographs. The expansion was visible. He estimated the total volume at nearly 8,000 cubic yards. Removing it could cost more than $68. Ling ling ling. June studied the estimate. We don't have that. I know. The bank won't lend us that. I know. Then what are you going to do? Noah placed the expired agreement beside the photographs. First, I'm going to ask him to stop. Clay Rourke received Noah in the mill office. He was 57, broad through the shoulders, with gray hair cut short and a voice that rarely rose because people usually stopped talking when he began. A framed photograph of Clay's father hung behind the desk. Another showed Thomas Mercer shaking hands with Clay at a county livestock fundraiser. Clay pointed to the chair across from him. I heard you were back. I found the old dumping agreement. Clay leaned back. Your father and I had an understanding. The paper ended in 2016. The paper did. The understanding didn't. Noah placed the aerial photographs on the desk. The material crossed the old fence. It covered the drainage swale. That fence has been falling down since I was a boy. It still marked the property line. Clay studied him. You were living in Lexington while your father was trying to keep this place alive. Noah did not answer. Clay continued. We took material your father wanted. We kept the hollow filled. We helped maintain access. Nobody hid anything. I'm not saying you hid it. What are you saying? I'm asking you to stop adding material until we survey the line. Clay's expression changed. Not anger. Something colder. You come back for 3 days and decide a 7-year arrangement is a crisis. I came back and found my fence under 4 feet of sawdust. Clay stood and walked to the window. The mill pays 34 families. If I start trucking every yard of residual material to a commercial facility, that cost moves into every board we sell. That doesn't make my farm your disposal site. Disposal site is a loaded phrase. This is clean wood fiber. Then you shouldn't mind keeping it on your side. Clay turned. Your father understood that rural businesses sometimes accommodate each other. My father signed a 2-year agreement. He understood what it took to keep people working. My farm is also a business. Clay smiled without warmth. There may be a practical solution. He opened a drawer and removed a yellow legal pad. We grade the piles, shape the slope, make the area usable. At whose cost? You contribute $18,000. We contribute equipment time. Noah stared at him. You want us to pay you to spread material you pushed across the line. I want both businesses to survive. Send the proposal in writing. Clay's smile disappeared. This isn't a courthouse matter. Then writing it down shouldn't hurt anything. Clay never sent the proposal. 3 mornings later, Noah heard the loader before sunrise. He drove to the north field. Fresh sawdust rolled over the edge of the oldest pile. A loader operator saw Noah and stopped. Clay arrived. 10 minutes later. I asked you to stop? We're finishing material that was already staged. It was staged on your side. We can argue about 6 feet all winter. It's more than 6 feet. Clay looked toward the buried fence. If you want to spend money surveying worthless ground, go ahead. Noah did. The survey cost $2. Lope. It confirmed that the sawmill had crossed the legal boundary. In some places, the material extended more than 60 feet onto Mercer land. Noah placed marked stakes along the line. 2 days later, 3 stakes were lying beside the road. A 4th had disappeared under a fresh loader track. When Noah called Clay, Clay answered calmly. Survey stakes aren't permanent structures. They were removed. They were in an active equipment area. They were on Mercer land. You keep saying that as if the line changes the physical reality. It changes who owns the ground. Clay was quiet for a moment. Every dollar you force this mill to spend comes out of somebody's paycheck. That line is still the line. Noah replaced the stakes and installed a trail camera facing the disputed strip. He did not tell Clay. At the county co-op the following Friday, Clay stood near the seed counter with 4 farmers, 2 mill employees, and the store manager. A mason jar sat on the counter. It contained fresh sawdust. Clay saw Noah enter. Here comes the soil scientist. The men turned. Noah walked toward the parts shelves. Clay tapped the jar. I heard Noah paid a surveyor to measure sawdust. One farmer smiled. What's he planning to grow in it? Clay raised the jar toward Noah. There's your topsoil. The men laughed. Clay shook the jar. Just add rain and a college word for failure. Noah looked at it. Then at Clay. Is it from treated lumber? Clay's smile tightened. We run hardwood. That wasn't my question. No treated lumber. Noah nodded. He walked past them and placed 6 empty mason jars. A permanent marker. Sample bags and a used soil probe on the counter. Clay watched the cashier ring them up. A mechanic with a notebook doesn't become an agronomist. No. Noah picked up the box, but he can learn what he doesn't know. That afternoon, Noah filled the jars. Raw sawdust. Old pile. Field A. Field B. Control. Calf barn. The jar Clay had used to make him small became the first instrument in Noah's record system. It did not make him right. That lesson came next. Noah believed the oldest sawdust had broken down enough to use. Some of it was dark. It smelled earthy. It crumbled in his hand. He spread it across 4 acres of worn corn ground, incorporated it lightly with a disc, and applied the farm's normal fertilizer program. He planted corn. For 2 weeks, the field looked ordinary. By the 5th week, the leaves began to pale. The plants over the treated ground were shorter than those in the control strip. By the 8th week, whole sections had turned yellow. Noah sent tissue and soil samples to a laboratory. The results showed that the material was still decomposing. Microbial activity was tying up available nitrogen. The corn was competing with that process and losing. At harvest, the treated ground averaged approximately 47 bushels per acre. The control ground produced about 104, between seed, fertilizer, fuel, reduced yield, and lost opportunity. Noah calculated the damage at $9. Sambi. He wrote the number in red ink. Clay heard about the crop before the grain tickets were filed. At the co-op, he waited until June. Mercer stood beside Noah. Then he said, "Your father knew when a field was finished." June looked at him. Clay continued, "You came home with tools and thought that made you a farmer." The room became quieter. Clay reached into a folder and placed a typed purchase proposal on the counter. "I'll buy the 31-acre lower tract." Noah looked at the number. It was well below comparable land values. Clay tapped the page. "Sign it before your experiment costs your mother the house." Nobody laughed at that. One mill worker stared at the floor. Clay looked toward June. "Thomas spent 40 years keeping this place respectable. Noah's been home 2 years and turned it into a dumping ground with labels." Noah picked up the proposal. He read the price once more. Then he placed it back in front of Clay. "You keep offering money for land you call worthless?" Clay's jaw tightened. "It's worth something to the mill. It's worth more to the family that owns it." Noah took his receipt and left. June followed him to the truck. For several miles, she said nothing. Then she asked, "Are you studying the soil? Or are you fighting Clay?" Noah looked through the windshield. "If I can't tell the difference..." "Stop. Can you tell?" "Not yet." That evening, he closed the first experiment. In his notebook, he wrote, "Failure. Raw material applied before maturity. Do not repeat." He did not blame Clay for that field. The mill had created the pile, but Noah had chosen the method. If he expected anyone to trust his future records, his first record had to tell the truth. 3 weeks later, June found a blue field notebook behind old cattle sale receipts. Most pages contained ordinary farm notes, calving dates, hay yields, repair costs, rainfall. On a page from August of 1998, Thomas had written 4 lines. Ground behind calf barn stayed soft in August. Manure. Bedding. Shada. Not the shavings alone. Noah read the lines several times. It was not a formula. Thomas had not discovered a secret treatment. He had simply noticed that the ground behind the calf barn behaved differently. For years, bedding, manure, spilled hay, urine, and rain had mixed there. The material had aged before becoming part of the soil. Noah collected samples. The soil behind the calf barn was darker than the lower field. It held together in small aggregates. Instead of breaking into powder, its organic matter reading was higher. He took the notebook and samples to Ruth Hall at the county extension office. Ruth was in her early 60s and had worked with small farms across eastern Kentucky for more than 3 decades. She listened without interrupting. Then she opened Noah's first lab report. "You have a carbon source," she said. Noah waited. "You do not have a soil program." "I figured that out." "No. You figured out one bad method failed? That isn't the same thing." She pointed toward the blue notebook. "Your father left you an observation, not a business, not a recipe. What would make it a program? Separation, testing, ratios, moisture, time, control plots, records." She looked directly at him. "And enough honesty to reject your own material when it isn't ready." Noah nodded. Ruth continued, "You also need to know exactly what the mill is sending over. They say clean hardwood. They say many things." Noah showed her the survey and expired agreement. Ruth examined photographs of the piles. "You have old material and fresh material mixed together. Bark, fine sawdust, coarse shavings, soil from the yard, gravel, possibly oil contamination near equipment paths. So I separate it. You test it, And if it's clean, then you build small piles, not fields. How long? Longer than you want. Noah built 6 trial windrows. He used older hardwood sawdust from the lower portions of the pile, cattle manure from his barns, spoiled hay, and crop residue. He kept fresh material separate. He screened out rocks and metal. He rejected material from areas near mill equipment traffic until tests showed it could be used safely. Each windrow received a number. W1, W2, W3, W4, W5, W6. Each had a record sheet, source of material, date mixed, estimated carbon and nitrogen balance, moisture, temperature, turning dates, rainfall, odor, texture, germination test, curing period. The work was slow. Noah used an old manure spreader, a rented loader, and a thermometer long enough to reach the center of the piles. When a windrow became too wet, he opened it. When one stayed cold, he adjusted the mixture. When another smelled strongly of ammonia, he added carbon. 2 piles heated unevenly. One dried along the southern edge. Another contained too much fine material and compacted. Clay watched from the mill yard. He began calling the site Noah's laboratory whenever drivers were nearby. One afternoon, a trucker asked what W4 meant. Clay answered before Noah could. 4th way to lose the farm. The drivers laughed. At the co-op, Clay said Noah had put numbers on garbage and called it research. He renamed turning trash, Clay said, and started keeping invoices. The jokes no longer changed Noah's decisions. The failed cornfield had done something useful. It removed his need to look correct. He only needed to become correct. By the following spring, 2 windrows passed, Noah's basic maturity checks. He did not spread them across 20 acres. He applied them to 3. 1 strip received compost. 1 received the normal fertilizer program. 1 remained untreated. He planted cereal, rye, and clover, followed later by sorghum sudangrass. He measured growth. He weighed forage. He photographed runoff after storms. He performed infiltration tests at the same marked points. The first season's differences were modest. The second seasons were harder to dismiss. Water entered the treated soil faster. Surface crusting decreased. Roots traveled deeper. Forage production nearly doubled, compared with the poorest control area. The soil did not become perfect. It did not turn into black prairie earth. It became more functional, and the result repeated. That mattered more than a miracle. When Clay heard about the 3 green acres, he changed the joke. Anybody can make 3 acres look good. He said at the co-op, let him try feeding cattle with a notebook. Clay had stopped saying nothing was happening. Now he said it could not scale. That change told Noah more than an apology would have. Noah sent Clay a certified letter. It included the survey. It demanded that the mill stop placing material beyond the property line. It requested a meeting to restore drainage. Clay replied through a local attorney. The mill claimed Thomas Mercer's long acceptance had created an ongoing right to use the area. The letter described the material as beneficial wood residuals. It questioned whether the old fence had represented the true boundary. It also warned that restricting the mill's disposal practices could increase operating costs and threaten local employment. Within a week, people began repeating the same sentence. Every dollar Noah costs the mill comes out of somebody's paycheck. At church, a mill employee's wife asked June whether the farm intended to sue 34 families. At the feed store, a man Noah had known since school said, I understand the property issue, but Clay keeps a lot of people working. Noah replied, I'm not asking him to close the mill. That may not be your intention. It's not my action either. The man shrugged. Lawyers have a way of changing that. The pressure worked. Noah became the man threatening the county's jobs. Even as the mill continued using his land, June confronted him at the kitchen table. How many families work there? 34. How many live here? 2. Then make sure being right doesn't make you careless. I don't want the mill closed. Clay knows that. He's using the workers as a fence. Then don't push through them to reach him. Noah read the attorney's letter again. Then he checked the trail camera. The footage showed a loader crossing the survey line on 4 separate mornings. On the final recording, the operator pushed 27 bucket loads onto Mercer land. The same week, a mill crew removed brush along the drainage berm. Noah watched a small excavator deepen a channel toward the property line. He drove to the mill. Clay met him outside. "You're opening that drainage toward my compost pad. We're correcting standing water in the log yard. It will send water across the line. Water has always run downhill, not through that cut." Clay looked toward the equipment. "You want kiln lumber sitting in water because you placed compost in a low area? I placed it on my land behind a diversion berm, and our yard is on ours. You're cutting a channel aimed at the farm." Clay stepped closer. "I have 34 people expecting paychecks. You have 6 piles and a theory. Close the cut before the storm." Clay looked past Noah toward the road. "You think a survey gives your 6 piles priority over an operating mill? It gives the farm ownership of its land. It does not give you control over rain. No, but it makes you responsible for where you send it." Noah sent Clay a drainage map that afternoon. He copied the county road supervisor. The supervisor visited the site and warned both parties in writing that widening the channel could increase runoff onto Mercer land. The weather forecast called for heavy rain in 5 days. The cut remained open. 2 days later, Noah installed a second camera. On the evening before the storm, the footage showed Clay standing beside the excavator. The operator pointed toward the channel. Clay pointed toward Mercer Ridge. The machine lowered its bucket. The recording captured Clay's voice through the rain. "Open it another foot." The storm dropped more than 4 inches overnight. At 2:13 inches the morning, Noah heard water moving outside the house. Not falling. Moving. He drove to the compost yard. His headlights swept across brown water pouring through the opening from the mill. The flow struck the upper edge of windrow W5. The pile split. Material rolled across the pad and into W6. Fresh sawdust from the disputed strip washed through the barrier. The water carried bark, gravel and mud into the curing area. A section of cover crop disappeared. The culvert below the field clogged. Water backed into the lower pasture. Noah used the loader until daylight, cutting relief channels and moving what he could. June stood near the barn in a raincoat. By morning, 3 windrows had lost their documented uniformity. More than 900 feet of cover crop had been buried or scoured. Fence wire sagged beneath debris. Ruth arrived at noon. She walked the site silently. Then she pointed at the damaged windrows. "You cannot sell those under the old records." "I know. You can rework them." "How long?" "Months." Clay arrived 40 minutes later. He remained on his side of the fence. "That was a 100-year reign," he called. Noah walked toward him. "You opened the berm. We protected the yard. You were warned where the water would go. You built compost in a drainage area. The drainage changed after your excavator opened the cut." Clay looked over the damage. "You want to blame the mill because your project couldn't handle weather. My camera recorded you telling the operator to open it another foot." Clay's expression changed for only a moment. Then he said, "A camera does not show engineering." "No, it shows choice." Clay's voice hardened. "I protected 34 jobs from a flooded log yard. You protected your yard by sending the water through mine. I protected a business that matters to this county." "So did I." Clay returned to his truck. Before leaving, he said, "Be careful. Noah, if you start calling clean wood fiber pollution, you may invite questions about what you're doing with it. The repairs cost approximately $14. Seabay. That included the culvert, earthwork, seed, lost material and outside equipment. It did not include Noah's labor. It did not include the delay. And it did not include the 3 windrows he marked with red boards. Not ready. The Mercer operating account could not cover the repairs. The farm had already absorbed the $9,300 crop failure. Fertilizer prices had risen. The bank payment remained ahead. June suggested stopping. "We can fence it off," she said. "Let the lawyers handle Clay. With what money? We sell the north field. That gives the mill exactly what it wants. This cannot be about beating Clay." "It isn't?" She looked at the damaged compost yard. Then, prove it. Noah opened the cattle records. Thomas had spent years improving the herd. 11 bred heifers represented the newest part of that work. They were not the least valuable animals. They were the animals most likely to improve future calf crops. Noah selected them for sale. June saw the ear tag list. Your father chose those bloodlines. I know. He waited years for those heifers. I know. And you're selling them to rebuild piles of sawdust. We're selling part of the herd to keep the ground under the herd. The heifers brought approximately $19. Soupe. Noah used the money to repair the culvert. Build a stronger diversion berm on the Mercer side. Separate raw material from curing material. Purchase used screening equipment and reseed the damaged field. He kept the sale receipt. He folded it inside Thomas's blue notebook. The right decision did not feel like victory. It sounded like 11 bred heifers calling from a trailer as it pulled away. For the next 2 seasons, Noah expanded slowly. 3 acres became 7. 7 became 14. 14 became 24. He did not apply identical amounts everywhere. The poorest fields received more attention. Steeper ground received cover crops and surface applications designed to reduce erosion. He kept untreated strips. He used the same laboratory whenever possible. He recorded rainfall. He recorded forage weights. He recorded failures. One batch cured too slowly and remained unused. Another contained too much coarse bark. A third germination test showed poor results. So Noah reworked it rather than spreading it. By the 4th year, the treated ground showed consistent improvement. Organic matter rose gradually. Infiltration improved. The soil held moisture longer after rain. The fields still suffered during heat. They simply failed more slowly. That difference became critical when the drought arrived. By late June, ponds across Rowan County were low. By July, pastures stopped growing. By August, farmers were feeding hay intended for winter. The Mercer control strips turned brown. The restored fields faded, but continued producing. The ground beneath the taller forage remained cooler. Roots reached moisture. The compacted soil had never held. Noah harvested enough forage to protect most of the farm's winter supply. 2 neighboring cattle producers asked to buy loads. One of them had laughed at Clay's mason jar years earlier. He stood beside the baler and pushed his boot into the soil. How much rain did you get here? Same as you. The man looked toward the compost rows. You still keeping records? Every batch. Ruth doing another field day? She might. The man nodded. Put my name down. There was no applause. No apology. Only a change in behavior. For Noah, that was enough. Blue Ridge Reclamation worked on disturbed land. Road cuts. Utility corridors. Construction areas where topsoil had been removed or compacted. In September, the company lost a supplier for a highway revegetation project. The replacement material had to meet requirements for consistency, cleanliness, maturity, and delivery timing. The planting window would close in 30 days. Natalie Price found Noah's results in a county soil field report prepared with Ruth. She called Mercer Ridge at 7:18 on a Tuesday evening. June answered, Noah, there's a woman asking whether you have 1,200 yards of finished compost. Noah took the phone. Natalie explained the project. What volume can you deliver? I may have 1,180 yards ready. May? It still needs your test. You aren't certifying it? I'm telling you what my records say. You decide whether they're enough. There was a pause. How soon can I inspect? Friday. What are your sources? Hardwood sawdust, cattle manure, spoiled hay, and crop residue. Tracked by batch. Any treated lumber? No. Any municipal biosolids? No. Any batches exposed to uncontrolled runoff? Yes. Another pause. How much? 3 windrows. They aren't included in the offer. Natalie said. Most people would have answered that differently. Most people don't have my red signs. The proposed price was $24 per cubic yard. Atunu. 180 yards. The contract would be worth $28. Sanbay Archer. Blue Ridge would cover transportation. After screening, Testing, loading, and preparation. Noah expected to retain approximately $21.920 before taxes. The contract alone would not solve every problem. Combined with forage sales and avoided hay purchases, however, it could cover the $26.800 bank payment due October 15. 17 days remained. The farm had enough hay for approximately 23 more days at its current feeding rate. If the restored fields stopped producing, Noah would have to sell 18 cows before winter. Clay learned about the inspection within 48 hours. His first call went to the county. He described Mercer Ridge as an unpermitted commercial waste processing operation, accepting industrial residuals. The complaint forced an inspection 10 days before Natalie's visit. The bank heard about the complaint and paused discussion of any payment extension until it knew whether the county would restrict Noah's operation. The inspector requested source records, runoff controls, storage maps, and proof that finished material was separated from incoming material. Noah showed everything. The inspector identified 2 improvements: a secondary containment edge near the raw material area, additional cover over one curing section. The corrections cost $2. 103 days of work. The county did not shut Noah down. Instead, it created a written record confirming that Mercer Ridge separated raw material, curing material, and finished compost. Clay's second move was quieter. He contacted Blue Ridge directly. He sent photographs of the largest sawdust piles. He claimed Noah had no independent material source. He said the product existed only because Rourke Hardwood supplied the wood fiber. He warned that Noah might not control future supply. Then Clay printed a 1-page advertisement. Rourke Regenerative Soil Blend. Local hardwood fiber. Local manure. Proven Kentucky results. The advertisement used a photograph of Noah's restored pasture taken from the county road. Below the photograph appeared the words, "Why pay the middleman?" Noah carried the page into Clay's office. Clay looked at it without embarrassment. "You don't own the idea of mixing wood fiber and manure." "No, you don't own the fiber. Not after it crosses onto Mercer land." Clay leaned back. "You built a story around material my mill produced. I built records around material you called worthless. Take the photograph issue up with the printer. Your number is at the bottom. The buyer needs volume. We have volume. You have raw material. We can blend it. You don't have curing records. We have equipment. You don't have field records. We have your fields." Noah placed the advertisement on the desk. "No. You have a picture of them." Clay's eyes narrowed. If Blue Ridge is serious, it will not gamble a highway contract on a farm that can barely make its bank payment. That told Noah something. Clay knew the amount. Somebody had talked. "Did you tell Natalie about the rejected windrows?" Clay smiled. "I told her you had contamination problems." Noah walked to the door. Clay called after him. "You think they're driving here to buy your notebook?" Noah stopped. "That's exactly what I think." Natalie arrived with a field technician at 8 on Friday morning. She did not begin with the restored pasture. She looked toward the red signs. "Show me the pile you wouldn't sell." Noah led her to the 3 damaged windrows. He explained the storm, the altered drainage, the fresh material that had mixed with curing compost, the loss of traceability. "Could it still be usable?" Natalie asked. "Eventually. Why not include it now? The old results no longer represent everything in the pile. What happens to it? It gets reworked, retested, and cured again. And if it fails, it stays here." Clay watched from the road. Several farmers gathered near the gate. Ruth Hall stood beside June. Natalie's technician collected random samples from the raw sawdust, curing piles, rejected windrows, and finished material. Natalie selected batch numbers without warning. Noah retrieved each record. Input source, mixing date, temperature history, turning schedule, moisture correction, germination result, laboratory test, application, location. She selected a load and asked him to trace it backward. Noah identified the finished row, its source materials, the date of mixing and the field trial connected to that batch. Then she selected another. At W14. She stopped. The temperature dropped early. Noah opened the log. Moisture loss, along the southern edge. We reopened it. Added water. Remixed it, and restarted the curing period. You reset the date? Yes. That cost 6 weeks. Yes. Why not keep the original date? Because the pile didn't care what date I wanted. Natalie looked toward the field. Show me the control. Noah took her past the green forage, to a brown strip he had deliberately left untreated. Natalie did not accept appearance alone. She reviewed rainfall, soil tests, forage weights and application rates. Then she placed 2 metal infiltration rings into the ground, one in the restored field, one in the control strip. Her technician poured equal amounts of water into both. The water in the treated field disappeared into the soil. Water in the control ring remained pooled, then began moving sideways across the surface. Natalie took soil cores from both locations. The restored soil held together around roots. The control soil broke into hard plates. Clay walked through the gate, carrying a folder. I hope he explained where every yard of that fiber came from. Natalie stood. He did. We can provide 10 times the volume. Of what? Sawdust. Bark? Manure. Whatever blend you specify. How long has your blend been curing? We can process it quickly. How many completed batches do you have with traceable source records? We run a sawmill, not a paperwork company. How many field applications have you tracked? We have Noah's results. Noah remained silent. Natalie looked at Clay. You have raw material. Clay opened his folder. We brought a sample of Rourke soil blend. A mill employee carried 2 5-gallon buckets through the gate. The mixture was fresh, uneven and warm. Natalie asked. Which pile did this come from? We blend by volume. Which production date? This week? What was the starting moisture? Clay looked at the employee. The employee looked away. What manure source? A local cattle operation. Which one? Clay closed the folder. You're turning a straightforward product into a paperwork exercise. Natalie pointed to the buckets. If you cannot trace the sample, you cannot tell me what I'm buying. Clay looked toward Noah. He learned everything from material we supplied. No, Natalie said. He learned by testing what your material could and could not do. Clay pointed toward the green field. Those are our results. No, those are his controls. His rejected batches, his application records, and his risk. Clay's face darkened. We have larger equipment. You have faster equipment. We have 34 employees. And Noah has 4 years of proof. Clay left before the inspection ended. That night, Noah reviewed the finished inventory. The numbers were tight. The buyer required at least 1,100 yards. After excluding the damaged windrows, Noah had 180 available. There was no room for another loss. 2 nights before final sampling, Noah's trail camera alert activated at 11:36 p.m. Headlights moved near the compost yard. He drove north. A small mill truck was pulling away from the side of the finished material area. Fresh yellow sawdust lay against the lower edge of windrow W19. The material did not cover the entire pile. It contaminated one side. Tire tracks led back toward the mill road. Noah called Ruth. She arrived shortly after daylight. Together, they sampled the affected area. There was no way to determine precisely how far the new material had entered without separating and retesting the batch. The affected section represented approximately 160 cubic yards. At $24 per yard, it carried a gross value of $3. Bye-bye, Susher. The bank deadline was now 9 days away. June stood beside the windrow. Can you screen it out? Not with proof. Would the buyer notice? That isn't the question. It may be the question that decides whether we keep the lower tract. Noah looked at the fresh yellow line along the pile. If I sell it, every record behind the other loads becomes weaker. June closed her eyes. Then mark it. Noah placed red boards around the affected section. Not ready. He removed 160 cubic yards from the offer. Available volume fell to 1. Ling, Arling. Below Blue Ridge's original requirement. Clay denied involvement. He said trucks moved near the area every night. He said Noah had built a business beside an active mill and could not blame the mill for every tire track. Noah provided the camera footage to the sheriff and county inspector. The video did not clearly show who had unloaded the material. It showed the truck entering from the mill side and leaving minutes later, enough to create suspicion. Not enough to solve Noah's immediate problem. Natalie called that afternoon. "You're below the requested volume." "Yes." "Can you replace it? I have curing material." "But it isn't ready. The planting window does not move." "I know. You understand we may need another supplier." "I understand. Could you blend part of the curing inventory into the finished material?" "No. You may lose the contract." "I know." Natalie was silent. Then she said, "Send me the updated batch list." Noah expected the cancellation call that evening. It did not come. The next morning, Natalie asked whether Blue Ridge could adjust the first phase of the highway project. She had shown the inspection records to the project manager. They agreed to reduce the initial purchase to 1,020 cubic yards. If Noah could complete delivery on schedule, and if all final samples passed, the gross contract dropped from $28. $320 to $24. Subibasher. After costs. Noah expected approximately $18. Lambe. The financial margin became dangerously small. The bank payment remained $26. Babe. 7 days remained. The farm's remaining hay supply had fallen below 3 weeks. The same afternoon, the drought forecast worsened. Noah had to sell enough forage to close the gap without leaving his own cattle short. He recalculated the winter ration 3 times. June reviewed the farm account. Even with the reduced contract, forage sales and avoided feed costs might still cover the payment. They would have almost nothing left. No reserve. No new equipment. No replacement heifers. No protection if a tractor failed. Noah closed the ledger. "We can make it." June looked at him. "Make the payment?" "Yes." "Make the winter?" He did not answer immediately. "Probably. That is not the same word." "No." "Is there another choice? Sell the lower tract." June looked toward the window. "No." The final laboratory results cleared the remaining 1,020 cubic yards. Blue Ridge signed the revised purchase agreement. 6 dump trailers arrived Monday morning. The scene drew more people than Noah expected. Farmers, mill employees, the bank's loan officer, the county inspector, 2 Farm Bureau members. Nobody announced a ceremony. They came to see whether the trucks were real. Noah operated the loader. Every bucket came from a numbered finished batch. Each truck received a load ticket tied to the records. The contaminated section of W19 remained behind red boards. Clay appeared at the gate, carrying his Rourke soil blend brochure. When the 4th trailer was nearly full, he approached Natalie. "You understand that every yard on those trucks came out of my mill." Natalie held the mason jar Clay had once raised at the co-op. Fresh sawdust remained pale inside it. In her other hand, she held a jar of soil from the restored field. "This came out of your mill," she said, raising the sawdust jar. Clay looked toward the crowd. Natalie raised the second jar. "This came out of his discipline." Clay's voice hardened. "We can make more. You can make more sawdust. We can mix it faster. You cannot make 4 years arrive by Monday." Clay pointed to the trucks. "He just removed 160 yards because his own product failed." Natalie looked toward the red boards. "No." She opened Noah's batch folder. "He proved his records control the product. The product does not control his records." Clay shook his head. "This is paperwork." Natalie handed him the sawdust jar. "This is raw material." Then she pointed toward the load tickets. "This is a product a contractor can trust. We have more volume. You have more uncertainty. We have better equipment. You have equipment. He has traceability." Clay looked toward the mill workers standing near the road. One of them had operated the loader during the early years of dumping. He stared at the red signs. Clay said, "Without Rourke hardwood, he has nothing to process." Natalie looked toward the brown control strip and then toward the restored field. "Without your mill, he would have had a different problem." The road became quiet. "But you do not own what he learned while solving the one you created." Clay looked at the line of trucks. Natalie closed the batch folder. I'm not paying for waste. She pointed toward the field. I'm paying for the years he spent making it trustworthy. The fifth trailer moved forward. The farmer who had laughed at the co-op stood beside Ruth. Noah, he called. Would you test a field that isn't yours? Noah stopped the loader. I'll show you how to test it yourself. The farmer turned to Ruth. Put my name down for the next field day. A mill worker looked toward Clay. Why didn't we keep records like that? Clay did not answer. No one applauded. No one mocked him. The silence was stronger. By late afternoon, all 6 trailers had left Mercer Ridge. They passed Rourke Hardwood Mill one at a time. The final truck carried the last load ticket needed to complete the revised $24 cents Witanta contract. The compost sale did not save the farm by itself. After testing, screening, loading, and preparation, Mercer Ridge retained approximately $18. Lambe. The restored fields supplied enough forage to avoid major emergency hay purchases. Noah sold surplus forage to 2 nearby cattle producers while preserving enough for his own reduced herd. Together, forage revenue and avoided feed costs were worth approximately $29. Sube. The higher figure reflected the drought-driven hay market, but it came with risk. Mercer Ridge entered winter without a comfortable reserve. On October 17, 4 days before the deadline, June walked into the bank carrying a check for $26. Babe. The loan officer stamped the payment receipt. The lower tract stays with the farm, he said. June placed the receipt in her purse. That was the idea. The family did not recover everything. The 11 heifers were gone. The contract was smaller than first expected. The operating reserve was nearly empty. 4 damaged or contaminated windrows required additional work. The farm could not afford expansion. One equipment breakdown could still create a serious problem. But the 31 acres did not go to Clay. The remaining cattle stayed, and for the first time in years, the weakest fields were producing more than they cost to maintain. Clay did not lose the mill. Noah never demanded that he lose it. The county required the mill to respect the surveyed line and restore the drainage route. Clay's insurer reviewed the survey. Warnings, storm reports, and camera recordings. A settlement covered part of Noah's documented runoff losses and legal expenses. It did not make him rich. It paid for repairs already completed and costs already carried. The sheriff's office could not prove who had placed the fresh sawdust beside W-19. Noah did not claim proof he did not have. He kept the video. He kept the samples. He kept the rejected material behind red boards until it was reworked and tested again. 3 months later, Clay drove to Mercer Ridge. He found Noah repairing a gate. Clay remained beside his pickup. We're running out of space behind the mill. Noah continued tightening the hinge. We've started paying to haul material south. Noah nodded. It's expensive. I know. Clay looked toward the numbered windrows. You prove there's another use. No. I proved one system works with some of it. We could supply cleaner loads. You could. We could separate bark from fine sawdust. You could. We could deliver on schedule. You could. Clay waited. What would it take for you to accept material from us? Noah put down the wrench. Written source records. Every load? Every load. No treated material. Correct. Define delivery area. Yes. Volume limits. Yes. Payment terms. Same as any supplier. Clay looked toward the farmhouse. After everything, you would still work with us? With terms? Noah let the words settle. Not assumptions. Clay nodded once. He did not apologize that day. He returned 2 weeks later with a written proposal. The first page acknowledged the expired 2014 agreement. It acknowledged that the mill had crossed the surveyed boundary. It acknowledged that modifications to the drainage berm contributed to damage on Mercer land. It prohibited unrecorded deliveries. It gave Noah the right to reject any load without explanation beyond his stated standards. Clay had signed the document. At the bottom, beneath the proposed terms, he had written one additional sentence. We made our disposal problem your responsibility. Noah read it. That's what happened. Clay looked toward the restored fields. I thought keeping the mill running justified it. It explained it. Clay waited. It didn't justify it. Noah said, "No." Clay looked toward the barn. Thomas would have handled this with a handshake. My father's handshake had a 2-year date on it. Clay lowered his eyes. I stopped seeing the difference. That was the problem. They shook hands. The handshake did not restore the old relationship. It created a different one with a property line, one with records, one with limits, one with consequences. Noah kept the first mason jar on a shelf in the barn office. The same jar Clay had lifted at the co-op. Beside it sat Thomas Mercer's blue notebook. A second jar contained pale, compacted soil from the failed cornfield. A third held dark soil from the restored pasture. The bill of sale for the 11 heifers remained folded inside the notebook. So did the final Blue Ridge load ticket. Noah never told visitors that sawdust had saved the farm. That would have been too simple. Fresh sawdust had damaged his first crop. Uncontrolled piles had buried fences. Redirected water had destroyed months of work. A contaminated windrow had nearly cost the family its contract. The material became useful only after it was separated, balanced, tested, cured, documented, and sometimes rejected. The same was true of the land. It did not recover because Noah believed in it. It recovered because he measured what was wrong, admitted when he failed, and continued only when the evidence justified the next step. On the final page of Thomas's notebook, Noah added one line beneath his father's observation. Dad was right. It wasn't the shavings alone. Outside, the mill continued running. The farm continued carrying debt. Machines still broke. Rain still came at the wrong time. Some years remained difficult, but the property line was visible again. The water followed the proper channel. The mill workers kept their jobs. And the fields the county had considered finished were holding enough life to keep the Mercer name on the gate. Rourke Hardwood had pushed its waste across that line for years because Clay believed Mercer Ridge was too weak to object. Noah never proved him wrong by shouting louder. He proved it with a failed crop he refused to hide. With 11 heifers he did not want to sell. With survey stakes he kept replacing. With 6 numbered windrows. With red signs placed on material that was not ready. With 160 cubic yards, he removed from a contract his family desperately needed. With 4 years of records, and with 24 green acres standing between his family and the loss of their farm, Clay had seen mountains of sawdust. Noah had seen damaged soil, unfinished work, and a question worth answering. In the end, the sawdust did not save Mercer Ridge Farm. The discipline to turn a burden into proof did.